$3,000 over the
Perhaps
past
you should
5
tell us
years.
what the resort tax rate is.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
3%.
3%.
It's in the report. It's 3% per month on the rental. So, and we actually did a lot of math trying to equate that to if I was, it's in the report, if I was, say, getting, we looked at the average rent in the city from economic development states that the average rent in the city is about $850, or so that would be about $10,000 per year in average per apartment unit for rent. And so over 5 years, if you paid $3,000, that would be an average of $20,000
A year.
Yeah. So
So that would be $1,700 a month. But you're saying 50%, so really you're talking about a rental rate of $3,300 per month.
No. It's double what the rental rate was. I think you must have left something out. If it's 3%, $3,000 represents $10,000 in short-term revenue over the last 5 years, or an average of $20,000 per year.
Whoa. $3,000 over 5 years is $100,000 of rental income.
Correct.
Now, you're saying that the normal bar is 50%. 50%. So somehow, wait a second, Richard, let me finish. Somehow this is going to be lower than 50%.
Yeah.
So in other words, someone would have to have earned more than $200,000 in regular revenue to have the $100,000 matter.
For one unit.
No, but it's and or, right?
I guess the point is, we usually hear that these
or.
rentals rent for a significantly
But
higher.
it might be one unit.
Let me finish. If they rent for significantly higher than you would get for just a month's rental, that is, for the short-term rental rate, you would get on average double. And then that would work out for one unit, short-term rental.
But you're still talking about $3,000 to $5,000 a month. If you rented like,
No. It's $20,000 a year. So divide that by 12.
So if you own a property and
It's
generated,
850 times 2. It's $1,700.
no, but Richard, you have a bar that says, if I rent 50% of my revenue, right?
That's one way you can qualify.
And then you're saying, okay, but we're gonna lower that bar if you have a certain dollar amount. If you can't qualify for the 50%.
I mean, there's two different ways to qualify. Either
Right. If
cumulative.
you can't qualify for the 50%, you can qualify under the 3,000.
Right.
So the assumption is that, okay, maybe I rented it 25% of the time, but I still got enough to qualify. Because if I rented 50% of the time, I don't need a dollar amount.
Yeah.
right,
Okay, so whatever this dollar amount is going to be less than 50%.
yes.
Which means that you really would have needed to have earned,
But that's for one unit.
Yeah.
but that's what we're talking about here.
I mean, if you do the math,
This is a very high number.
if you.
You think so?
3,000?
I mean,
No, it's actually, it's
20,000
not. No,
a year
it
in
works
revenue?
out to be $400 a week for a short-term rental, which I think is insignificantly cheap, over the course of 5 years. This thing says you have to generate $3,000 in the past 5 years. If you do the math at $400 a week, you come up with $3,120 in resort taxes over 5 years, renting at $400 a
That's
week.
at 100%.
Mr. Chair,
Right,
Chair,
that's one apartment. One apartment.
I had some conversations during the break, and I will say, I realized that the data I was looking at was basically for active accounts, and one of the ladies in the audience indicated that she had a previous account that wasn't showing up on my records because it's inactive, but that she was paying a lot of resort tax a few years more than 5 years, like over the last 8 years. And so I do think that perhaps I may have set this a little too high because it didn't show up all the inactive accounts that, and so we would perhaps recommend, if that's the way you're going, that be extended, say, $3,000 over the last 8 years. And it's still really more than generous, we think, but
Again, I think that, people who have been paying resort tax and doing the best they could, that we need to think about setting this bar a little, I'm thinking about the poor, no, lower. I'm thinking about the poor
Jonathan-
people, the poor
Jonathan-
guys who have one unit.
But
Then you're
let me
gonna-
explain.
We purposely decided as a board not to implement a program here, so grandfathering is kind of like
A privilege.
privilege and a fairness
Right.
issue. You still got to have, I want somebody who's been doing it.
Right.
know,
This is a one-off.
But
we
I
would
guess one
recommend
question I need to ask
we,
Richard, because you have access to the resort tax. rolls,
Can be
right?
shared with us.
You have access to the resort tax, right?
it is not public record. and-
But you have access.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess my question to
Still
you is,
concerned
when
about-
you look at these two rules, okay, are people going to really be able to meet these criteria?
Yes, I
Or-
see several people in the audience that have been intimately involved with this procedure, that have been coming to the meetings and attending the public hearings and sending letters, who will be able to qualify for this.
I don't want to set a bar that no one's going to meet.
Richard, roughly using these standards, and I know now we're talking about an 8-year gap, how many properties do you think, outside of the areas that the ordinance contemplates, so we're talking about the areas not covered by the ordinance that might
Correct,
grandfather?
correct. But that being said, we
How many
understand that this goes
properties
to
are
the
we talking
commission,
about, roughly?
and the commission may not pick the same areas.
Yeah, so it's about 10 properties that might qualify.
10 properties.
Again,
Citywide.
Outside of the areas.
I
that would
calculated
allow.
that for 5 years, so
Pretty
it may
small
be a
number.
little more
But-
over 8 years.
Again, we're not, what, I think,
Would,
right.
Mike,
Yeah,
Mike, please.
that's what I'm saying.
Right, but that indicates that a small
If you
number of
want a
people are
larger number
operating.
of people to
Oh, ho, ho, ho,
qualify,
ho, one at a time, I've been warned, one at a time.
a grandfather program is based on a small number of people that can qualify. If you wanted a large number of people, you should revisit the vote that
Exactly.
said you can't do it in these areas.
It should be small, John. It's a fundamental fairness and due process thing, and there weren't too many people doing it, and I'm worried about those 10. That's enough.
Right, and I also wanted to add
Okay,
that,
citywide, 10 people, that's a very small number.
On that
If you talk-
citywide, it's 10 in these specific districts that we did not extend it. to.
Citywide.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
but it's not in
One
the
other
other
issue.
districts, it's not in the
You-
Flamingo, it's
you-
not in the hotel districts, it's not in the multifamily large districts.
Well, there is one
Hold
other
on one
issue.
second. Go ahead,
You know,
Richard.
you guys, you as a board are making a recommendation to the city commission, who is going to hear this in September, the first, September 9th. And we've purposely pushed the schedule because we knew you were going to finish today, and not continue it anymore.
That's fine.
Okay, so now the point is, you're making a recommendation on geographic areas, which they may or may not
Exactly.
adopt in its entirety or some
Correct.
portion.
Right.
So we would like to have something clear on the grandfathering, if, in case they say this or this area is not included as of right, but we still like the idea of the grandfathering. If you include the Flamingo Park area, then you're talking about 20 or 30 different properties.
Based upon what Richard has just said and the way these numbers play out when you do the math, I'm comfortable with this. I think,
Just get it up to the commission.
yeah, exactly. Thanks, Gary.
Randy? I know you want to speak.
You know, to the will of the board, whichever way we go, yes, I just want to move the ball forward today. I'm not sure 10 people is encompassing enough. You know, then you kind of run into the question of the haves and have-nots, where you have folks here that have had legal representation